You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Welcome to The Man Hug, the monthly men's mental health podcast. I'm Dean McShane.
I'm Dan Cooper. I'm Ian Pearce-Hayes.
And I'm Conleth Kelly.
Each month we will discuss a different topic related to men's mental health, which will include a guest speaker who will discuss their own personal story. And each month we will also be showcasing an organisation or charity within the Merseyside area who work within mental health to help build your signposting skills. Hello, welcome to the Man Hug. We have some amazing guests who we will introduce in a moment. And as today, we will be talking all about things masculinity. So on this, which is our third birthday special. So happy birthday, gentlemen. Happy birthday. I'm sure we'll have a little chat about that at the end. But so first off, we're just going to go around and introduce our guests and get them to tell us a little bit about who they are. So start off with someone who's returning for the second time.
Right.
Dr Walter Tasosa. So
yes,
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Dean. My name is Walter. I'm a mental health nurse by profession, having worked in mental health services for many, many years before eventually coming into academia just 8 years back. So since coming into university life, I've been a lecturer on a wide range of subjects.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming. So Walter, where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Zimbabwe.
So
the
home of Bruce Grobbelaar.
Yes.
Yeah, so the icon that is Bruce, who's a future guest.
Yes.
Amazing. So thanks so much, because you said you're gonna be able to share us an international perspective of what masculinity is like for someone from Zimbabwe. So that's going to be really interesting. Mike, first time on the Man Hug. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. Don't know why it's taken you 3 years to have me on, but there you go. Just saying. Yes, I'm Mike Caulfield. I'm a consultant nurse and multi-professional approved clinician. And I work with Cheshire Rural Partnership Trust, based over in Chester. But I'm also the clinical lead for suicide prevention for the Trust as well, and do a lot of work around that, like the strategic part of my job. So, yeah, so cheers for the invite.
Brilliant, thanks, Mike. And again, it's a different perspective. Looking, your profession will be really interested in terms of masculinity and input and output. So, amazing, thanks for joining us. And Mel, another guest that we've had previously. So you're obviously very special, that we've invited you back.
You've not been on before, mate. That's my second time.
Your second time as well, isn't
Second
it?
time.
It's about quality, not quantity. Just saying.
Amazing. So Mike, Mel, sorry, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thank you for the invite. I'm Mel Bowen. So I'm the CEO for Spider Project. I've worked in drug and alcohol, mental health for 30 odd years now, sort of clinical side, but now very much on a non-clinical side since 2007. Started the Spider Project up on the Wirral, aiming at basically a creative recovery, non-clinical project.
Yeah, very talented musician. We featured the Spider Project a few times on the podcast, so if anyone hasn't listened to those episodes, please do, because it's such an amazing place, and obviously we're always promoting the amazing work that you guys do there, Mel. So yeah, thanks again for joining us for this. So for our third birthday, we thought we want to do something we've not done before, a round table discussion, get men in to talk about masculinity, because I think over the last few years it's been a hot topic, hasn't it? There's been lots of documentaries. There's been a lot of documentaries I've found that focus on toxic masculinity, and I want to try and avoid that as much as possible today. I know we will have to touch on some of it and the traits, but I think it's getting too much coverage for its ugliness, and we're here to talk about masculinity and the positive sides of masculinity as well, really. So the first question, and it is open to the floor, really. What does masculinity mean to you? When you hear that word, what is the first thing that springs to mind? Who wants to start us off with that one?
Gone quiet.
So I just didn't take a breath because I was waiting for you to speak then, Conleth, you were coming around with something really profound.
Well, it's funny because we did actually put this out. You put that out in the Man Hug, and
on
questions. You did a couple on the Instagram, and I started answering, and I thought I can't answer this, just in snippets, and it's a really, really tough question. Like for me, it is. You know, I don't mind actually saying that. Like, you know, it is. I agree with what you said there earlier. But to me, you know, I always like to say this word, I become a dad at a very young age. That kind of thing, whatever. And thank God I did, because it was the making of me. Things is, to me, it's the difference between, like, you know, for me anyway, just my own personal thing, it's the difference between being a dad and a father. Anybody can be a father. Okay, it's easy, like, you know, dip it in, dip it out, like, you know, that kind of thing. Being a dad, it's that fucking responsibility. And actually going, right, okay, I got both, and it's passing those things on to not just to sons, but also to daughters as well. You know, someone who they can rely on and things like this. But yeah, I'm getting wild up here talking about it.
Yeah.
But that is it. That's one little thing for me anyway.
Yeah,
in particular.
nice,
So there you go, got the ball rolling.
Yeah, that fatherhood is where I went to in my head, and then I thought I wouldn't say that because you kind of excluding a whole
you're right.
like load of men. So it's not really about masculinity, isn't about fatherhood, is it? But that's what I went to in my head.
Yeah.
I think, like, you know, that's probably one of the big signs, isn't it, of good masculinity is a good father, I suppose. That's how I'd like to, you know.
Yeah, I do agree. The you know, definition of masculinity is very difficult. It's very difficult to define it because it's socially constructed, you see, and therefore, you know, it's a social construct, so it would vary from one culture to the other. So I'm in a position myself where I've experienced two cultures now, and I can actually see the difference in terms of what masculinity means. From my perspective, I think masculinity means being a provider, a breadwinner. That's the first thing that came into my mind. And as young kids growing up in Zimbabwe, that was part of what we were socially, you know, socialized to look at what boys are, you know. We would go out, like when I used to go at my grandparents' house during holidays, it's the boys that went out milking, because my grandparents had a head of cattle, probably 15 to 20 of them, and every morning during holidays, it's the boys that went to milk the cows, it's the boys that looked after the cows in the field, and our sisters, our cousins, the girls would then bring us food whilst we are actually in the fields looking after the cattle. So again, we already got separated from a very young age, where then the girls were more like caregivers, bringing food for us, and we are the providers. We are looking after the very, we are looking after the animals that then look after us by providing us with milk. So I think that's what came to me first. I think
that's really interesting. Amazing, thank you.
No, I just add on that as well. I think culturally, probably in our culture as well, traditionally that was what we were seeing, wasn't it? You know, it was about the man being the provider, the head of the household, the breadwinner, and you know, and I think that's probably shifted a lot over the years. But to go back to the question, I'm going to be dead honest there. Whenever you hear the term, it makes me feel really uncomfortable. Yeah. It makes me just kind of squirm in my seat a little bit and kind of go, and I don't like the term. And I think it's probably because I was just thinking now when you've asked the question there while you were answering, just thinking, is that because, and it probably is because of how the term's used now with toxic in front of it. Exactly. And now and how all those attitudes and all those kind of behaviours and all those kind of, you know, people involved in that, how they're portrayed, how they come across and how they put their views across are so aggressive, so in your face, and so if you don't like it, you know, you're not one of us, and almost, you know, perpetuating this thing that you're less masculine if you don't agree with them. And I think that's why it does, and I think that's why it's hard to define, because it does just makes me sit and just go, well, I don't like it as a term, you know, and it is that thing around, you know, you can go, well, it's about being a man, but surely it's about being a good person. And rather than being defined by your gender or whatever, it's like what type of person you are, you know. So yeah, I don't like the term, so I'll just go. Thanks, bye.
Yeah, I think Mike's absolutely right. I think and that's that crisis, isn't it? And that's what, you know, we said we wanted to avoid that in terms of the toxicity that surrounds it. But it is about this crisis in masculinity, and I think it's because some of those what Walter described in that social construct about the provider, the person that's the strong person. All of that is changing, and it should change. And I guess then because of that, obviously then in terms of that's all unregulated in terms of social media that's coming out. And I mean, we've been to something recently, and someone put it really well for me. He just said it shouldn't be men against women, women against men. We both have an interest in terms of good relationships, and I think that's the problem, isn't it? That it is about that. So when Mike was saying then about what that masculinity means, it is about who we are, finding out who we are, comfortably we are. Not, you've only got to look at in terms of there's a big debate, isn't there now, about social media and access to phones. You wouldn't let your kid, any child, go into, a big marketplace on their own. And yet that's what we're doing in terms of with social media. It's unregulated, and who knows what kids are seeing and the untold damage that does. You can't unsee some of those things. And that's the problems with accessing gambling, porn, that's having really terrific problems on people. And if you look at porn, I think it's something like, probably in this room, who got their sex education from porn? Probably all of us, some of us from catalogues. But it's that whole thing, isn't it, in terms of how you reduce another gender to body parts. And I just think it's that, and surely we're better than that. I think what Mel and Conleth said about in terms of, for me, part of my understanding was definitely in terms of fatherhood and then that responsibility, definitely. I was an older parent, but it made me see my mum and dad, who'd been really young as parents, in a totally different light as young people, struggling. My dad was in the army, and so I was born abroad. So there was the difficulties of that, and it just made me see them very differently. I remember writing to me dad about that, because we'd sort of drifted apart a little bit, and it just made me see the responsibility as these young people, from a small village in Wales, out in the world, trying to bring someone up, and the difficulties. And I'm lucky, I was loved as a kid, and I've had that time, I guess, to form that relationship. But that's the key thing, I think, with masculinity. It's about finding yourself in a safe place, and it shouldn't be opposed to, against women. We've got to find, in collaboration with women in terms of finding ourselves. But we have to acknowledge, the shit that is, the misogyny that's out there. I mean, seeing that teachers' conference, 1 in 4 female teachers are actually feeling humiliated, undermined because of what they're feeling. So there is a crisis, but we need to then talk about it and to look at, what defines us and how we can work together, not against each other, in actually finding that, so that we've got better relationships. And I think that, that's what this is part of, isn't it? Is that discussion.
So when I was thinking about it, I think it's something very personal to us all. And the problem is nowadays with social media, you are getting different views thrust down your throat, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, that can be a negative view. But for me, masculinity, again, very personal, has changed so much within me over my lifetime. As a younger man who had a father who wouldn't talk about his emotions, who was, going back to what Walter was saying about, very much a breadwinner in those early sort of formative years in my life. That side of things has been instilled in me very heavily, but also the emotional restraint of not talking about your feelings was also instilled in through my father's behaviours, which didn't eventually work out too well for my dad, because he ended up abusing alcohol. But I've changed as I've got older and realised that you've got to be more of almost a modern man, really, and talk about your emotions, because that's the best way of actually being able to cope with the society we live in, really. And I think one of the main things that I've learned as well, being a man, people through society see you as may have power in society, through social conditioning, but even if somebody looks at you with they're a man, they're masculine, they have a certain status in society, doesn't mean you can't be kind. And I think kindness is the key thing when it comes to being a man. I have no doubt that in my career I've probably had opportunities that perhaps people I've worked with who are females may have not had because I'm a man, perhaps. Nobody's ever said that to me, but it's something I've thought about over the years. But I see that as you know, not ignore those opportunities, but always work with kindness and always appreciate everybody that you work with. And for me, that's what being a man is. It's trying to be kind to everybody and non-judgmental and inclusive. You know.
That's a really, really good point.
I did think there's something that touch on what you were saying there, Dan. I said, you know, my dad was very similar in the sense that, you know, didn't show his emotions, didn't really talk about it, and it's almost like the generational side of things where you have, I mean, I think we're probably a bit of a similar age, you know. My dad died 18 months ago when he was 76, so, you know, kind of brought up in that 50s and 60s where, you know, he worked at Shell Stanlow, you know, a predominantly male environment, and it was probably 8 out of 10 blokes who we work with, but all the same. And I think the generational side of things is that, from what you said there, I can really kind of identify with as well, is about us being slightly different in the sense of encouraging that and it being okay to talk about your feelings. And then going back to what you were saying, Conleth, and linking all this together, there is a method to me madness, is that, you know, generationally to our children, or those of us who've got sons, you know, around perpetuating that more positive image, but then we're battling against what's happening with social media at the moment. So, I mean, I know my lad will be 19 in August. I know when he was at school in his mid-teens, 13, 14, 19. Remember he was a little baby when I brought him into uni. I had a hair then as well. Did you? He was saying about some of his attitudes that were coming through, that he was hearing through other lads in school, and it links into the thing you're saying about the teachers, you know, the female teachers saying about that. Luckily, he's turned that around, and actually you can see why everything in that was wrong now, and he's almost a champion of, you know, masculinity, to use the term, as a good thing rather than this toxicity that some of the things he was coming out with when he was in his middle teens, you know. So I think there's something around us. Is it something around the arenas that we work in? Because I think we've all worked in healthcare, you know, is there something around that where that kindness and that compassion because of the jobs we do? Where if you've got somebody of our generation who has worked in maybe a predominantly all-male environment that isn't conducive to that as well, is that another barrier that's coming again?
It's really, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And just kind of like a couple of points that people have said there, which I wanted to pick up. I found really interesting, you know, what you were saying as your own cultural background of you had to go out into the fields to work type of thing with cattle and you know, and other countries it's very similar, isn't it? And then but then you look more closer to home whenever there's like gender reveals and things like this. Why are we still using blues and pinks for colours of boys and girls just for the start, you know, the scene, which you know, made me think of that. And in terms of careers as well, really interesting, because I think again, when I think of masculinity, I always thought of like I always had to do an engineering job or a construction job, because that's what all of the men in my early life, my surroundings, were doing. And then when you've gone into, you know, how many male nurses have we got in here? There's probably a collective noun for it, isn't there? A gaggle of male nurses. A compassionate. Yeah. But again, you've probably all got similar experiences where you've told someone, I'm going to go into nursing. It's not a man's job. You know, I remember someone in my family saying that to me when I was younger. I was like, what?
But sorry, just on that, Dean, as well, going into mental health nursing, that I found when I did was probably more understandable for a male than going into general nurse. I mean, I love general nurses. I might be wrong with that, but I was just thinking with mental health nursing, because I always remember doing my nurse training that everyone wanted to work at Ashworth. And was that about masculinity and secure services, isn't
general nurse, and it's that whole thing about the technical stuff. It's A&E. It's the excitement and technology side of it, isn't it? Rather than, you know,
but it's that side, because I know within stuff I've written about as well, like, you know, there is research out there, there's evidence actually saying males within this field of nursing, like, you know, say adult nursing, community nursing, anything like that, whatever, they are seen as the enemy within the work population. Especially within, there are specific groups within the community, because it's just like, no, this is our job, this is our role. I've said before, every male nurse, I hate that word, male nurse. I hate that. Like, people say, oh, here's Conleth, the male nurse, and I always touch my genitals and go, oh yeah, thanks for reminding me, like, you know. But the thing, I mean, it really does, no, it does. It's just. But the thing is, though, it always really does. But the thing is, I just like touching.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, to be honest.
But the thing is, it's just like, you know, we've all worked with female nurses, but not every female nurse has actually worked with a male nurse. And it is that kind of thing where you go into it, they go, oh, like, you know, doing that. And I've had that many times, especially being in the community district nursing, you know, all those kind of things, whatever. Yeah. And then I get called, the doctor. But we are digressing, sorry, I do apologise.
But it is language, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, just a male nurse is quite interesting. I'm not a nurse, but I recognise that phrase. I don't actually recognise this as Sharon, female nurse. Yeah. I don't hear people getting introduced as that. But I was just thinking about, like, for me, thinking about, like, generations, and the obvious thing to point out what Ian was saying before, and it's come up, Mike mentioned a few people who said about social media, it's the obvious thing to go to, but actually, I think about the generation before, you know, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I remember feeling we've changed that. I'm from a family that were sort of very sort of Victorian in that, and men will be men and all that bollocks, you know. And actually, I remember being sort of in the 90s, and so imagine saying to my old fella, you know, I'm in touch with my feminine side. Yeah. He'd be like, you know what I mean? Yeah. What? And we seem to, but by the 90s, that language was acceptable, and that was, and then now, I think maybe it's gone right back. We've gone right backwards. And what's the common denominator here? It is social media. And I know that's just two words, but social media opens up a raft of things to young men, as you've said. Porn, gambling, the whole shebang. Everything, you know, it's all there on a plate. And we're talking about kids of 8, 7. And we weren't exposed to that. No one around this table was exposed to that at that age. It was much later for us. And so you just think about that for a sec. You think that's pretty mad.
Well, I was going to say, our social media was the hub.
Yeah.
That was our social media, where you had an audience of people, maybe friends or just people you knew in the pub. That was your social media. That was where your conversations happened that you're now having online. Or you had the bar stool preacher, didn't you? Yeah. You know, who now is the guy on Twitter talking... where people are just going, and then we'll wait, all people engage with it, and that was our social media at the time. Yeah. You know, so it's the same kind of principles, but how it's shifted.
But remember as well, it was the perfect storm. We had this thing called COVID, we had a pandemic, people were locked away. I know we've had pandemics before, and there has been isolation, but this was on a massive scale and it was worldwide. People were locked away. And the evidence will show, like, you know, online gaming went through the roof. Online interaction with social media went through the roof. Everything did. And, you know, we actually have that discussion about dads needing lads and things like this, whatever, and having that. There is a lot of people where they don't have that, not father figure, but that figure to be that, not controlling, but that teaching, following, role model. That's it, exactly. Like, you know, we've had people in here from... like we talked about the Woodchurch community groups, whatever, just saying about the support workers, that role models like that, all gone. And the only role models they had, and we don't want to go back to it, but these gobshites, like, you know, doing this on the things. I'm just reading today, like, you know, all these things with cheekbones and things like this. You know, there are people actually promoting, actually hitting your face with a hammer to actually raise your cheekbones, things like that. And it's banned off TikTok and things like that. And just, but these young people are lost, like, you know, and so we're downstream, and yes, we've got that problem, but we've got to look at it from a public health point of view. Those younger people coming up, we've got to make sure that they don't go through that. It's our primary prevention. Those people, secondary, tertiary prevention, we're still there to help them. It's just we've got to try and focus in on this lot as well.
I'm just going to move us on to the next question, because this has been, you know, already that's been such an amazing discussion. But I want to pick up the next question leads for what you were saying at the start, Walter. Growing up, what messages did you receive about how a boy should act? So again, thinking, you know, probably again role modelling, social learning theory, things around your environment and your community at that time. There would have been a lot there of showing you how a boy should act. And before I move you, you know, to get you to chip in, I always go back to when we had Ian Knott, the rugby player, and he said something which has always stuck with me. In rugby communities, which you'll probably know better than anyone, Mike, high rates of suicide. And he said the reason for this is the first thing they teach boys in rugby is to never show any pain. That goes into teen years and into adulthood of not being able to come forward when you're struggling. And it really made me think, you know, there's a lot of things that we do mould in children around how we should be, and especially if it's not to show pain. That's huge, isn't it? Massive.
True.
Walter?
Yeah, I think what I remember, as a boy, is that boys don't cry. You see, and I can see the consequences of it in terms of mental health. I will just give you a bit of background about what is, in terms of the history, in terms of migration into an entirely new culture altogether. What we have experienced as men is gender reversals, and that has had a massive impact on men's mental health in this country. Remember, my definition of a man in terms of masculinity is someone who provides. But then coming into this country, that provision bit is erased. There isn't much difference in terms of, being a wife and a husband in terms of provision. It's more or less the same. And in many cases, actually, women are providing more than their husbands. So that in itself has created a lot of tension within households. And I remember doing my ethnography some years back when I was doing my PhD that, that area, was brought up by many participants, during my study. And that then led to men looking for safe spaces to actually express themselves in terms of their masculinity and where they've come from. So a lot of, men that I know have actually ended up, completing suicide because of that. And the main cause had been that gender reversal where their self-esteem has been damaged so much. So culture really plays an important role here. And but at the end of the day, I think, masculinity or femininity must be celebrated. It's just about responsibilities. It shouldn't be toxic. But as we have all agreed here, social media is kind of defined the whole idea very differently. But when we go back into history from an African perspective, being male and female was something positive. And, each person had their responsibilities. In any case, providing, we've got a lot of matriarchal families, where actually the women actually take control of the families, but not in a bad way. The men still provide, but the person who is pressing the buttons is the woman within the household. So, so so I think it should be celebrated rather than being looked at as something that is really a bad thing,
Yeah, brilliant.
So, yeah.
Anyone else in terms of messages you received about how a boy should have?
Going back to the sport thing really as well, and from what Ian Knott was saying, I've heard Ian speak a couple of times. It's brilliant to hear him talk about his experiences, but I think I go back to kids football when he used to play there, and it was like, the kids would get injured and start crying, and then you'd see the parents or the coaches in our day, there was no physios then, was it? They just ran on, got the magic sponge out and said, stop crying. Stop crying, come on, pull yourself together, and it was that whole thing where that was kind of, where it starts. And being involved in kind of, non-league football and watching kids football as well through that, it still goes on today, where it's still that thing of don't show your hurt. I remember I played cricket for the season out in Australia as well, and that was one of the big things. And I think that was more about the Aussie culture rather than anything. But again, quite, masculinity is a sort of big thing with Aussie men, isn't it? Was, you never show that bowler that he's hurt you. He could smack it in the face and you go, but don't show him any pain, just face up the next ball. And I think with the kids' football, it's that as well, it is just don't cry, just don't show weakness. Is the big thing, and going linking it to what you're saying there around suicide, and I'll probably talk about that at length later on, is, a big thing for men is that attitude around showing you're emotional, showing that you're struggling is a sign of weakness, and it takes more strength to put your hand up and go, I'm struggling with this, than it does to actually just keep going.
I mean, one of the things that's changed for that, because I can certainly recognise that from what Mike's saying. I can remember I always played football as a kid, always played football, and we lived on an estate, and I can remember there was a couple that lived behind us that had grass and stuff, so we all used to play on there for a big game. We were round at theirs. Patrick and Moira, I can still remember them. So Moira was actually a year younger than me. She was the best footballer on that pitch. And I can remember when you look back at that, and I'm thinking, but she's a girl. you know, there was definitely that recognition. She was a girl, but she was the best footballer once because she had a brother, Patrick, who was also pretty good, but she was just faster, stronger. She was just an amazing. What's good now when I look back at that is now girls play football and play it really well. So that's, for me, that's a real cultural change. You look back at, you know, you're talking about pinks and blues in terms of straight away, it's that going back to what Walter was saying about those cultural constructs, isn't it? And that's why the difficulty is as that's changing in terms of as women playing more of a dominant role in terms of you know, jobs and everything else providing. You know, you look historically, and that's been the case, hasn't it? We spent more of our time as hunter-gatherers in sort of big groups. And again, you look back in history, and there's been all sorts of differences in terms of a matriarchal society, an equal, you know, where it's been equal with men and women. It's just, and it's up to us really, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's that we, you know, for the last few hundred years we've had this in terms of it's men the provider. We're having this perhaps crisis and stuff now, but it shouldn't be against each other. We've got an interest in working together to actually get this sorted, it seems to me. And I think, you know, all the sort of social media, that toxicity is that as we're trying to find identity as young people and looking for those role models, it's having that discussion because we all have an interest in better relations between men, women, and us all as a community, I think, to actually sort that out. And that's what, for me, this discussion is about trying to resolve that. Because I know, I mean, my passion is cycling. I love cycling. I've just spent a couple of weeks in Mallorca. One of the high points there of Mallorca is actually cycling. The number of people that overtook me, and most of them were women, who overtook me on this highest point in Mallorca. And there was this young German woman who could see I was probably wobbling on my bike a little bit, and I'd run out of water. She come back, she said, "Oh, it's not far now," she said. "You're nearly there at the top." And do you know what? It really helped me, and I laughed because she'd obviously seen me wobbling a little bit on my bike, and I think I'm a strong cyclist. But she just gave me those few kind words and just said, "It's only a couple of clicks, you're nearly there at the top," and it just helped me. And it's not men versus women, women against men. We've got an interest in working together, and that's hopefully what this discussion is about. And it's good, interesting, isn't it, finding out the experiences that we've had, but also the positive role models that have really influenced us in it to change.
I just thinking about my childhood then, and there's obviously a lot of conditioning going on. You know, go and play football down the park with your mates, and you know, play with these, you know, get a stick and use it as a gun. You know, I used to run around the park and whatnot. But then I just something just
last week.
It was running around Liverpool. It was just something just dawned on me, and there's perhaps one person in my life, in my childhood, that probably formed me as a person more than I've ever realised until this moment, and that's a friend, my best friend at primary school, Mark. And he didn't want to play football with the boys. If anything, he wanted to play games with the girls. But we'd stand there and we'd talk about like all manner of subjects, like proper intellectual subjects. He was a clever lad, bless him. And we talk about Shakespeare, and he'd talk about Chaucer, and I'm like, who are these people? What are you on about, mate? But I found him dead interesting because he was very different to everybody else. And I say he was like wanted to learn different languages, and I'm thinking it doesn't have to be playing football all the time. I can still do that, but I can also have these emotional sort of conversations about different subjects that kind of perhaps just made me realise that I don't have to be the man's man that everybody expects you to be.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you probably can all remember from your own childhood the lads that weren't doing the football, or they weren't going and grazing their knees and running around the woods and things like that.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, they probably came in for a lot of ridicule.
That's what I mean, yeah.
I perhaps one of the reasons Mark didn't is because I'd stand by him and say, you know, back off, leave him alone, sort of thing. And we looked out for each other. But then, you know, he was nasty to me one day, so I never spoke to him again.
He's on his own after that.
Yeah, that's it.
The question I've got next, and it leads into a lot of the things you've just been saying, and sadly I have to use the word toxic for this one, but do you think toxic traits are encouraged in certain environments? So sport, school, work, online spaces. We've already mentioned it's pretty rife on social media. But what's people's experiences of toxic traits within the work life, or you know, within education or sports? we've touched on it with sport in particular, haven't we? You know, whether that's from a young child learning football, cricket or rugby, not to show pain and weakness, but I suppose you then see it in adult level as well of, you know, how many gay men have come out in football leagues over the last years, considering the number of men, you know. So again, there's that huge...
Got to be brave, haven't you, to come out in footy, like. Got to be brave. And yet, you think, I was just thinking about, like, going off it, like, a little bit. I was thinking about David Bowie. And, like, thinking about him in the early 70s, like, with some of the clobber that he put on, and Mark Bolan and people like that. And yet, like, all the sort of hard knock fellas off all the estates were like their boss, you know, and like behind those fellas with wigs and what have you, and because a lot of them were like, they were all big hard fellas, weren't they? But like something happened in the 70s where it was that masculinity was challenged through, you know, through that glam rock scene, like, and then there was punk, and that's just, that's where I went in my head with that. Just, you know,
because I think a lot of the subcultures have embraced that, haven't they? You know, say punk in particular, and you know, glam rock, where men were starting to wear makeup for the first time.
Exactly.
You know, it's a huge part of British subculture, isn't it? Really? You know?
So Bowie talked about that with the Spiders of Mars, doesn't he? That he said because the lads were from Hull, weren't they? And he said, you know, oh God, wearing all this makeup and stuff. But when he saw that he was, how popular he was, you know, they totally embraced it, and it just makes me laugh thinking of Woody Woodmansey, you know, playing with his lipstick and stuff like that. But it's the role models then, and
when he realised all the girls were
exactly,
after him.
totally, that's what it was.
It's kind of weird, isn't it? You know,
it is, but they totally embraced it. So it's interesting.
I think it came off the back of all like the feminist movement in the 60s, and like the barriers being broken down between masculinity and femininity, and like it's okay for blokes to be in the public eye wearing makeup, and because that all started to occur, you know, after that period in the mid to late 60s, didn't it? So perhaps that.
I think going thinking about toxic traits, you would still hear it would be the judgments of someone like that, like, you know, so, like new romantics. I mean, I wasn't old enough for the 70s, Mel, so the 80s, you know, with the new romantic movement, and it was the judgment that was made about their sexuality that they must be gay. And you know what, you still hear a little bit of that now, you know, with certain people, you know, high profile people, where that toxic trait of just making a judgment about somebody's sexuality based on how they look, you know, is still there. But it's great, like you were saying there, that the fellas who embraced it, you know, were the ones who you maybe not expect them to. You know, so even back then. But
those take those characters and then say, go the match like that. And that, do you know what I mean? And you're gonna have a problem, aren't you? But it's weird how in certain, Walter, it's on it right at the start. Social constructs, isn't it? Certain places it's allowed, certain things are tolerated within certain spaces, and then certain things are not. And sport, football, you know, imagine, you know, being a gay man in football, trying to come out, and that must be just.
It's interesting the point you made there about how supporters dressed, and I remember obviously the Liverpool supporters who were going over to Europe and dressing differently with the flick haircuts and the wedges and stuff like that, dressing differently, and how they were viewed by other supporters of other teams, again, where their sexuality was questioned and songs were sung to them, because they actually embraced the culture. It was different.
It's funny you say that, like, you know, because, you know, I've got a friend from over in Ireland, and it was actually my daughter pointed out, I thought it was a really good point, like, you know, whenever he comes over here, he wears, you know, he always has nice clothes to wear, but he really wears maybe more flamboyant clothes and things like that, because nobody gives a shit, that kind of thing, whatever. But whenever he's back home, he's more conservative, because he'd get ridiculed and all that kind of stuff. So as my daughter actually said, I loved it whenever I thought about it, goes, oh, so that's his drag queen, that's his drag queen persona, like, you know, dressing up, whatever. And I actually said this to him, and he didn't go, yeah, whatever. He went, yeah, she's probably right. That was lovely, though. It was gorgeous.
So, are we saying that we adapt our masculinity given the situation we're presenting?
I think that's
what Mel said, isn't it? Really,
the terrace culture, I think, in particular.
Well, you have the lad culture, haven't you? But I mean, the mods, the early mods used to wear makeup. They used to wear eye makeup. You know, some did. It became a thing. Certain. You know, and yet the mod scene was meant to be about lads in gangs who were hard and then there's one putting eyeliner on. You know, it's just.
Is it around that we should be celebrating uniqueness in people as well? You know, and that's again, I'll make reference to my son. You know, he's trying to be the reincarnation of Jim Morrison at the moment with his hair and his flares and his shit. And it's funny, like you walk around Liverpool with him, and you've kind of got, you know, the look of the city, isn't he? You know, with males his age, and actually he just looks totally different. And I worry about him being singled out and maybe bullied or picked on, or comments being made to him. And when I ask him about it, he says, "No, nobody bothers me," and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's something about why maybe culture is changing more than we think. And actually, do we focus on the toxicity of not just masculinity but anything generally, when actually, you know what, maybe people don't actually really give a shit anymore about other people, because they just, you know, they leave people to it. You do you, sort of thing, you know.
I think you're right. I think, you know, if you are unique and you're doing your own thing, it should be something that's applauded, really, rather than being a sheep and just following what society says you should be, really. You know,
but also not saying that you're brave doing that.
Exactly.
You're just doing it. You know, it's just, you know, it's one of them. It shouldn't be about courage and bravery by being different.
And it leads on nicely to the next question as well, Mike. So
I knew that.
you can come again.
No, I'm only coming once.
What's one emotion you wish men were allowed to express openly? I'm going to start it because we had Dr Seiss, who was the lead singer of the Boo Radleys, a couple of years ago, and he really touched on something. He said men are getting better at talking when they are sad, when they're low in mood, but he said what he finds as a psychotherapist now is that men are still really bad at expressing anger as an emotion. And I thought, do you know what, it's so true. I think, you know, if you've been peeved with something in work, or you've been done by a promotion, or something that your partner's annoyed you with, we're not very good at expressing that anger, I think, you know, and getting it out in a healthy way and saying, look, this has made me upset today and this is why. We tend to express it in different formats, whether that's punching things in the gym, you know, terrace culture, whatever it is, it tends to come out in a different format. Alcohol use, you know, illicit drugs, whatever. So managing anger for me, I think, is one. Or not managing it, just expressing that and talking it through openly with people, I think, is something that men definitely need to improve on.
I smiled because that was going to be my answer, and I had to think it over in my head. Actually, does that sound all right to say that men should express anger more? And I think it is that whole thing of how it is expressed, you know, and actually just being it okay for a man or anyone to say, I'm feeling angry, because everyone's human, you know, and obviously people get angry about different things in different ways and at different levels, but just being able to have a safe space where you can say, I'm feeling really angry about that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to punch a wall or punch somebody else or go and do whatever. But it is just having that safe space to be, I feel really angry about
what happens if you don't express it?
Well, that was going to be the next point. It bottles up, and because it bottles up and it bottles up, doesn't it? If you haven't got that pressure, that channel to be able to do it, it just builds up and builds up, and then is that when it explodes? So I'm glad you said that, Dean. Sorry, I was just because I was sat here just worrying about actually saying why, you know.
Sorry.
Is that just a male thing?
No.
But it's probably a human thing, isn't it? But you know, we go back to a lot of the things we say as the basics on the man hug around. Women will often come together to talk about their problems, whereas men come together to forget theirs. You know, and I think it's a sort of a classic thing, and especially with anger. You know, I think about one of my best friends, and whenever we meet, he spends the first half an hour just telling me how pissed off he is with work, and I'm like, get it out, go ahead, go for it. And he's like, oh, sorry, I do it all the time, don't I? I'm like, no, it's healthy, mate, do it, you know. It's not me, get it out. No, but I appreciate it. I think it's a really healthy thing, and like he offloads, and then you see he's a different person, and his shoulders are back down, and the veins gone in his neck, and you know, and I think it's a really healthy thing, and you know, to express that anger. But again, I suppose there's, as you say, there's a lot of people that don't, and it comes out in really negative consequences. Any other emotions anyone want to add that they wish men would?
No, you know, I agree with what you said. Whenever you talk about size, like, you know, I was thinking that was the episode of happiness. I think, is he going to say happiness? Because I'm thinking anger. I want to freaking do this and do that, punch things or whatever. You know, it is that kind of element instead of expressing it maybe vocally. But yeah, so. It is that kind of thing, but I know what I've done in the past, angry or stressed or upset. Like I've said before, it took up, at the time, long distance running. It was a form of self-harm. That's what it was. I'll come home from work and it was like, I'd say, right, I'm way off for a 3-4 hour run, doing this, whatever, and it was doing that nearly every other night. You know, and it wasn't until it was Andy's in PhD at Chester, Andy Lovelock, he talked about his, and I went, this bolt hit me right in the head. Fuck, that was me. It's that kind of thing. But yeah, it's I think we're very good at expressing love and things like that. Well, I know I am. I can say it,
Love and not a fighter.
Oh, freaking yeah.
Yeah.
I
I think being able to say, I can't do this,
it's a good one.
because, for some reason, when we look at masculinity, from my own perspective, men are kind of expected to be able to do everything, and not being able to perform a certain task or anything can be considered as a weakness. So then men go out of their way to please, and then that then has negative consequences to their mental health as well. They end up probably even going into debt, for example. When it comes to money issues, it's very much linked to masculinity as well, because you're a provider, and you can easily go into debt because you want to please those that are around you, and that obviously will then impact on your mental health as well, because of that idea. So I would say maybe being able to say, I can't do this, and being able to say to yourself, I'm not there to please everyone.
That's a really good one. I think, been guilty of that myself, and I'm sure most people admit the same. Yeah, amazing. Next question is, have you ever been supported by another man in a way that changed your perspective? And again, this might go back to kind of youth, or it might go back to childhood, or it could be kind of recent times, but I've kind of thought it was a really good one to look at how other men can support other men and how that changes your perspective,
I've spoken about this a couple of times already, but a very memorable moment in my life was when I'd had, for the last time, as it would happen, difficulties with my dad, and I ended up I've had a really bad few weeks because of it, and there's one person who I spoke to who managed to calm me down, and it was Ian Pearce-Hayes, who sat next to me today, because he was a university lecturer at the time, and I was doing the non-medical prescribing module, and I spoke to him for only about 5 minutes after the end of the lecture. I said, I don't know if I can do this, and he was just dead calm, and he says, if you need to drop off the module, we can put you on the next cohort. There's things we can do. Don't worry about it. You just focus on obviously sorting yourself out, and then come back when you're ready. Anyway, it's just the kind words of Ian, and just knowing that he cared and might not be able to relate, but just understood my situation, made me realise that I could carry on, and I did carry on, and I did pass the module, and then obviously you fast forward a couple of years, and then we become colleagues, and we become really good friends, and I see Ian as hopefully a lifelong friend and mentor that will, has always been there since I met him, and such a positive male role model that I'm just lucky to have in my life.
Amazing. Oh, okay.
I've got
It's okay to cry.
No, but that emphasises the point, though, that you being able to sit on a podcast that is going out there to the whole population, that you're able to share that, and that be fine. And actually, the response you got. I mean, it is interesting. You as men, the default usually is to kind of make a joke about that, or kind of, because it's that security that we get from making humour out of a difficult situation, doesn't it? Or whether that's just their own example, but actually to be able to do that in this forum, just go emphasise them. It takes strength to do that, and actually put it out there and not give a shit that you're going to be judged at all as well. So, no,
so best mate of mine still lives over in Spain, like called Jimmy Martin. We were really close years ago when we were kids, but when Jimmy met a girl from Argentina, and they legged it over to Spain, so I'm like left there on my own, and I took up with his dad, Joe Martin, who was who's no longer with us now, Joe, but Joe was a linguist and philosophy lecturer at Liverpool University. However, he was a wagon driver till he was 40 odd, and 6 kids. Went home and said to his wife, I've packed my job in, and he went to Salford University, and he was massively instrumental in me getting involved, and he was a very proud working class man, and he was very, very I've met loads of people who say, oh, did you know Joe? You know, God, he was massive to me. You know, loads of people who he was just very instrumental in their education and in getting them, you know, and he supported me right through my degree. He was great, and his favourite saying was knock on his door and he'd go, oh, fucking great, lovely to see you. He goes, made up when you call. He said, I feel like I can talk to you for hours. I can listen to you for about 2 minutes, like. So, yeah. Rest in peace, Joe, but God love him, yeah, Joe Martin.
That's amazing, it's amazing. Yeah. Have you got anyone, Walter?
Yeah, I think friendships have become kind of a common theme, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the same with me. I have a very good mate from childhood, actually. I think we've known each other since the age of 13. So it's over 42 years now. I'm 57. But he has been, very instrumental in supporting me. He still lives in Zimbabwe. I'm still very much connected to Zimbabwe. And therefore still got a lot of responsibilities there as well. So in my absence, he has been my pillar. He would run around for me. The things that I can't do, fly all the way to Zimbabwe, there's always that person. And he doesn't realize how, how so important he is to me. And I think it's probably the time for me to say, you know what, Caleb, you are very special. Yeah. If it wasn't for you, a lot of the things that I needed to do would not have been possible. But as men, we probably don't, express ourselves to that effect.
Well, tell him to listen to the podcast.
Yes.
Caleb, he loves you.
Yes, his name is Caleb Tapfuma.
There you go, Caleb. Big shout out, he loves you. And that's amazing, Walter. And but for people who move to different parts of the country and stuff, to still have that connection with someone, another man is really special, isn't it? I think I've mentioned it before, but there was a youth worker when I was on the Woodchurch estate as a young tearaway, and pulled me aside once and he said, you shouldn't be with this crowd, you can do more than this and things. And he pulled me aside and gave me a bit of a telling off, which I think I needed at the time, but I've never forgot him, and he gave me a lot of really good guidance. He was a really good male role model at that time, really, and I think I probably wouldn't have gone into education or nursing or anything if it wasn't for that down the banks, to be honest, really. So I think role models in men can come in lots of different forms. They can come in and out of your life as well, but like your role model there would be really instrumental in terms of your pathway of where you end up. It's huge, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah, Mike.
I just did think there's something wider around. For me, it's not necessarily specific people. It's knowing that there's a group of male friends that I've got that if you need them, they're there. And it is that very much. There's a bit of the Mickey taking that comes with it as well, and it's all taken quite light, but it actually comes from a really good place, as well, that you've got that. I know when I lost my dad 18 months ago, mates who, obviously they're all in group chats and things like that, and then the odd one or two would just go and say, you're okay, if you need anything, I'm here for you. And you kind of, it's an easy thing to put in a message to say, I'm here for you if you need me. I'm not actually mean it, or it's just like, but with people you have around you, that actually, if if you pick up the phone, that they're there for you, and they won't dismiss you, they won't judge or anything like that. So I think it's like, say, rather than having specific people, it's knowing that you've got those people around you when you need them. So
I think that's true, isn't it? And I think people who've again different life experiences over the years, things like grief and bereavement, you really find out who your friends are and your support. Amazing. Next question then. So, do you think masculine expectations affect men's ability to seek help or talk about mental health? So again, Mike, you're probably a perfect person to talk about this in terms of negative outcomes. But again, Mel, you obviously see a lot of men coming through your service who need help at that time. So obviously there's a lot of positive examples for this as well. And I suppose we've touched on some of the barriers as well. What stop men from coming when they need help the most. So anyone want to start us on this one?
I'm happy to. Because I think there is, I'm going to say it's a misconception. Because there's evidence to the contrary that men don't seek help. It's where I get back to my academic head on now. The National Confidential Inquiry, obviously in Suicide and Safety, did a paper back in, I think it was 2019, that was commissioned to look at suicides in middle-aged men. So just to give that a bit of context, so around 2007, 2008 and into 2009 was the last global recession. And it links into what you were saying about image and being a provider and roles, where that was when you saw the increase in suicides in middle-aged men. where it was like younger males previously, when we saw this shift. And like I said, they directly related it to the last global recession. So it was men becoming unemployed, middle-aged men particularly becoming unemployed, not being able to regain work, and all those knock-on effects that you were talking about as well. Well, you're talking about debt, relationship difficulties, financial difficulties, housing, drug and alcohol misuse, and this almost perfect storm that where we saw this increase. So the Confidential Inquiry did a paper looking into what was happening for these males. They looked at, there was a sample, I think it was something like about 1,500 men died by suicide in 2017 in England, Scotland and Wales. And he picked a sample of about 20% to look at what was happening for these guys, and they had coroner's reports, obviously had quite a lot of information. One of the big things that came through was when they did the literature search, there was this thing around men don't seek help. Then was it that there was more negative attitudes around mental health within men and middle-aged men? We've touched on them already. What they found was that there was only 9% of those men at that sample that they picked out of those men who had no service contact in the time before they died. So 91% of these males had made contact with a service to say they were suicidal. So it almost debunked that myth that men don't seek help, but suicidal men do. Granted, I still think there are a big proportion of men who don't, and I think that is around things around culture and around attitudes towards it and everything that we've talked about that just perpetuates that fear, or that, I should be able to deal with this. See, I'm starting to get wound up now. That man-up culture, that I hate it. It's that whole thing. If the worst two words you can say to a man who's struggling with his mental health is, "I'll just man up." So it's one of them. So men do seek help, but it's also around what does that help look like? Because what they were finding as well, and I think risk was assessed in some of those men as well, and large proportion, around 80% of these men who had service contact were deemed as low risk, even though they've gone to say, in a proportion of them had expressed suicidal ideation and intent when they were seeking help. So is there something about those attitudes translating into the people who they go and seek help from? I think going back to that, to the point around men do speak up, and I think that culture has changed a lot. I think a lot higher profile people that we've seen struggling with the mental health, coming out and talking about their experiences, I think is doing the world of good for the bloke on the street, I'm going to call him, to come forward and say, look, I'm really struggling with this. But then I think it's how they are responded to. It's okay, I'll just bring sort of kind of my own experience with that. So after I had COVID, October 20, I was quite ill. I was off work for a bit, had an ambulance out and all that, and it was that whole thing where, shit, I think I'm going to die here. So luckily survived, touch wood, okay, lots of support around that. But I noticed after it, feeling really angry about everything and everyone. And, when people were not quite sticking to the rules, I was like, you're taking the piss out of me. I've nearly died here and you're just rubbing it in my face. And just found myself getting really angry and really agitated. So I went, it's quite funny, it was the day after Captain Tom died. And this is mad, where I was on call, remember in the middle of the night being on call, and I was about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, trying to sort of bed out. And then I just went on the news on BBC and it said Captain Tom's gravely ill in hospital. Family are by his side. It was a BBC website. The last line was, but the hospital's visiting policy is that there should be no visitors. So where normally you kind of look at that and go, oh, bless him. I was like, why should he be any different to anyone else? And I just got really angry. I remember going down in the morning and my partner at the time saying, oh, isn't it sad about Captain Tom? And I just went, no. And I was. And when it was that whole thing, a colleague had the same conversation with me and they just went, are you messing? And it was that light bulb moment where it went, I need to do something about this. So it was that whole thing, and it was how my anxiety was manifesting. So I put my hands up and said, need help. So I went through our workforce wellbeing. It was the best thing I ever did. So I had counselling around it, and there was 2 lines that came out of it from the therapist I worked with. The first one that I came up with was smiley, not snarly. Because I was just snarling at everyone. But it was just based on this anxiety and this fear that I had. So then I just started going around smiling at everyone. I looked a right dickhead. I remember going for a walk around West Kirby Marine Lake and just walking past people and smiling at them. It was like,
why have you got a mask on?
Well, at that time, you were kind of okay for it. I remember being in the queue getting an ice cream, and this little kid come and stood right next to me, and his mum started panicking, going, I'm really sorry. I went, no, he's all right. And I just started talking to him about his ice cream, whereas the week before, I'd have been like, control your kid, so going forward and doing that was the best thing I ever did. And the other line was, not my horse, not my rodeo. why was I getting wound up about things that don't have any impact on my life? And I'm kind of taking that into kind of now, you know, it's like the things where I go, it's just not my horse, not my rodeo, why am I getting wound up about them? So that whole thing, the best thing I ever did was, like I say, but that afternoon with the Captain Tom stuff, he died that afternoon, and I did the right job on myself, thinking, that's because I said it, you know, that's because it was going like this, you know. So it was just that whole thing of
Mick killed
the barrier.
Tom.
I can only say so. But those barriers were my own barriers. And it was almost like a mental health nurse. I knew what was happening, and I knew what I needed to do, but it just took that tipping point to just go in, you know, I need to do something about this, I can't do this on my own.
Just to say, one of the great things there, what you just said from me, people come to me and goes, oh, you know all about this, like, you know, you should be able to express yourself. Oh no, I'm the fucking worst at doing that. I've said this to my family and things, because I like how you, and all your experience, you're going, no, I wasn't doing it. And I think that's another important thing as well, like, you know, I'm one of the world's worst at sharing things, whatever. I really have to sit down with family and things, because whatever. So it was very refreshing to hear other people.
But again, when we talk about masculinity in our professional mind and with our patients, we're probably talking about masculinity in a very different way to our insular masculinity of how we cope with everything that's going on around us in our personal lives. So that's kind of just what manifested with Michael, isn't it? Really interesting to see the differences in patients that I see as well in primary care. So obviously not specialised really, can be very, very open and like what you sort of modern masculinity. But I had a chappie recently, and he kept saying, "But I can't talk about my emotions, can I? I can't be weak." Well, you know, and I was like, "Why not?" "Oh, don't do that, do I?" And I'm like, well, why not? Who's told you can't be like that? Well, men don't cry. Men can't be emotional. Men can't talk about the feelings. I'm like, but you're here now talking to me about your feelings. Why can't you talk to... Honestly, he just wasn't getting it, bless him. And he left the room after about half an hour. I'm like, okay, perhaps we'll need another consultation on that one. But it's crazy how some people will have that self-awareness and develop their inner masculinity, and other people just completely will not budge from that. I'm a man. I mustn't show emotion. You know what I mean? Ugh.
But I think it's that whole thing around that impression of how men should be. And I think what I thought about in that sort of that scenario was like, I'm a nurse consultant in mental health. You know, it's like, and I don't know what to say. It's like the whole thing, we're not immune from it. You know, and I think the saying that I've heard, I came from a consultant to work with a good number of years ago. He said, you can't work in a paint factory without getting splashed. You know, and I think that is around the how hard it is to work in. That, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we work harder, it's harder than anywhere else, but it is that environment that we work in that actually, you know, we're only human at the end of the day. But I think it is that whole thing of recognising that and just kind of going, you know what, I can't do this on my own.
Brilliant. Great discussion. I'm going to finish with we've gone over the hour mark now, so I'm going to finish with a little bit of a final thought from everyone. What do you hope boys growing up today learn about masculinity that you didn't? So again, one point each for you in terms of bit of reflection on what you wish. For me, it's a nice simple one of if you do need help, go and get help. You know, there's no shame in reaching out for help and support. I say from me as a boy, that wasn't there. You know, it wasn't something I was taught. But now I just wish all boys, when I go into schools in particular, and I'm teaching young males in particular, just if you're struggling, you know, you'll only get help if you reach out and you talk with someone, and there's absolutely no shame in that. You know, there's power to you if you reach out, and especially when you need it most.
I think that point of what Mike's just said is really true, and I think it's probably even worse as someone as a consultant in mental health is then recognising that you need help, and it's a difficulty, but it should be part of it, shouldn't it? Because I think whatever you're dealing with, as you said, we're human, and particularly you're dealing with everyone else's issues, then there should be provision for that, but it is accepting that yourself. So I would say definitely to my younger self, you'll actually be okay, and it's good to talk. And that's, you know, and I know for my son, and he's somehow, despite me, I think he's just an amazing character, and I just think it is that, and he can talk. And sometimes, and that's the, you know, people have talked about their own children and how different it is for them. And that's, for me, that's that cultural change. So that's what's positive, I think, about the future, isn't it? That you can see those changes. But it is, I think it is being able to talk and not keep everything to yourself, because we are been there as well, when I know I needed help and didn't seek it, and it took longer to actually get resolved. And it's to seek help, because you can't, no person is an island. And I think I love that poem, because I think there's some truth in that. We are part of a more, a part of a continent, and I think that's really true.
Yeah, listen to yourself. You're a good person. You know right from wrong. Don't listen to all the noise on the external world of social media and whatever. And above all else, just try and be kind and a good person. And that's it's going to put you in good stead in life, isn't it? And be non-judgmental. Just that's it really, I suppose.
Yeah, particularly for men from my background, I would say it's about opening up and saying, I'm struggling, and seeking for help. A lot of the tragedies that I have heard of people that I know, talking about Mike, is those guys that have taken their lives simply because they couldn't come up in the open and say, guys, look here, I'm in this situation and I need help. So I think it's about seeking help and being able to say, I'm struggling, and help will be there. I think that's one key message I would want to send out to men of my generation. Thank you.
Just three things. The first thing is, I know it's like we've kind of sound bites around mental health and positive mental health, but the one that resonates with me the most around this, and the message to put across, is it's okay not to be okay. That's totally fine. I know it's thrown around a lot, we see it a lot everywhere. I mean, the Samaritans use it, and all that, but it is actually so true that actually, it doesn't define you. It's totally okay to be all right. I think the second thing was, I guess, it's if you are on the receiving end of a man in particular saying they are struggling, is to validate and to listen and to take it seriously, because then it can lead on to those other things as well. Not to judge, and just think about it's a massively brave step, I think, for any man, based with the culture of everything that we've all talked about today, to step forward and say, I'm struggling with this. So if you're on the receiving end, if somebody approaches you or talks to you, is just take it seriously and be there for them. Because if you don't, even if you haven't got the confidence to be able to support somebody in the right way, just by listening is a massive step. And I guess the third thing is, don't be a dick. It's like there's a lot of behaviour from a lot of people out there that is just can influence so many vulnerable young and older minds. So just don't be a dick.
Great advice.
I suppose I'm thinking about people in the project and giving back. Getting some more cliches of mental health, but giving back such a massive thing. And if I get two people on the starting line of recovery, and both similar backgrounds, similar age, what have you, and they both come in with the same sort of stuff. Obviously, no two people are the same, but two people with a similar sort of background, and what have you. Put them on the starting line of recovery. The one who discovers the power of giving back is the one that really races forward and takes off and tends to do really well with recovery. So, giving back is such a powerful thing. Giving to others, it helps you then to connect, which is massive, isn't it? Connecting and what have you. So giving back and connecting, and don't be a Tory. That's it.
Great advice. I love that giving back though, because you're so right. We've touched on it so many times in sense of, it's one of the 5 ways of well-being, isn't it? Yeah. You do something good for someone else, you feel good yourself. It's basic science, isn't it? But that it's so lovely to hear that it's powerful in recovery as well. You're seeing it on a daily basis.
I am, and it's that word that you're not allowed to use anymore. It's socialism, isn't it? It's about because when you're giving back, you're saying, well, I've got something, I can give you this, I can give you a bit of this. It's sharing, isn't it? It's about equality. Yeah. It's about, that's the way for you.
Connection is a massive thing. Yeah. I think bringing it to the second point you made about that disconnection. Yeah. This really can be quite damaging in a lot of ways. So that way. So
but the most important thing is not to be a Tory.
If there's one take home from this today.
Conleth?
Well, Mike stole my thunder. I was going to say, don't be a gobshite, man. But, you know, I don't want to get both biblical here or whatever, but, you know, JC, what did he say? Let he who was without sin cast the first stone. And it's just like, we've all got our faults, we've all got our flaws, we're all like this, whatever. And it's just because one thing that always sort of reminds me back to my school days is that kind of thing being hard. Like, you know, we supposed to be hard in sports and things like this, but to me it was because the school I went to, Christian brothers and things, it was us against them. It was that kind of thing. And don't cry when they're slapping you, don't cry when they're beating you up and things like that, just take it. It's that kind of element to it, whatever. And there was one thing in particular that really hit me later on, was a colleague, a fella who we always sat beside each other every year we went into. I always thought he is a good friend. He was a good friend. He moved away. But it wasn't until a couple of years later I found out he was gay. And I never knew this. He was, you know, spoke to other colleagues and didn't you know? I was going, no. I'm thinking, why didn't he maybe come out or things like this, whatever. And I think, was he frightened? You know, you have all these things that we said before. Obviously, maybe he'd been within the school, he'd been ridiculed even by the priest or the teacher. But I got to say, you know, I know Christian Brothers School's got a bad image and things like this. The priests and brothers who taught me were absolutely fantastic. It was the lay teachers who came in who were fucking just, you know, sadistic and things like this, whatever. But to me, it's just like, we've all got our faults and flaws, things like that. And it's just recognising each other. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, it's been such an. I mean, we could talk about it for hours, couldn't we? But you know, we've done well to get this to just over an hour. But yeah, really a lot to take from it as well. But thank you so much for being beautiful men, and especially for this discussion. You know, that's exactly what we're wanting to achieve in this discussion today. For Conleth, Dan and Ian, I just want to thank you for the last 3 years. You know, this podcast we set up not knowing how far it would go, you know, how many guests we'd have on or what we would do. And one thing I want to share, you know, we set up this podcast over a discussion where we said, if it helps one man, that's enough, that's all we need to do. And we've had quite a few men who've contacted us through the likes of Instagram to say if it wasn't for the podcast, they wouldn't be here, which is why we are still going and we will continue to go, knowing it's had this effect on certain men is incredible. But the reason I think it's so successful in that sense is that we just normalise the conversation, but we're showing men that there's so much support out there, it's untrue. You know, every episode we have the Hub of Hope where you can find local and national support in your area, and we're so blessed in the Northwest that on our doorstep there is an absolute multitude of charities and organisations and incredible people who have open doors, who are waiting for you when you need them the most. So for that, I think that's the biggest success that I can muster in terms of this podcast. So,
Dino, I'm sure the lads will join me in saying, you know, without you, the podcast really wouldn't be possible. You are the glue that sticks it all together. So thank you so much as well for the last 3 years, mate.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being amazing guests. Loved having you here. We're off to do some karaoke a bit later.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome to come and join us.
No, that's not my thing.
But thank you so much for everyone who's listened, and we'll see you soon.
We can all play a role in suicide prevention. Spotting the signs and starting a conversation with someone you're worried about can feel daunting.
But free online training from the Zero Suicide Alliance could help you gain the skills and confidence to have a potentially life-saving conversation.
It takes just 30 minutes and you never know when you might need to use it.
Be prepared. Take the training today. Visit zerosuicidealliance.com or search ZSA Suicide Awareness Training, because one life lost is one too many.
If you or anybody else you know is struggling with their mental health, visit hubofhope.co.uk or download the app today and find local and national mental health support.